Hello everyone, I'm back at last to tell you what happened with my third delivery. I recorded supernatural pain-free childbirth hyphen how to prepare in my last pregnancy, which was more than 15 months ago. And some of you asked, well, what happened? I'd already had a supernatural pain-free delivery with my second child, my first son, and I really wanted to share through that video how you also could have the same. Now I've learned through the last birth, my third delivery, some additional things which I think are very important, and I'd like to share those with you today. But first I'll tell you a little bit about what happened with my last delivery. And it was a long time ago now, as I said, 15 months ago my second son was born, my third child, and it was quite a journey. It wasn't what I was expecting. What I was expecting, having already had one supernatural pain-free delivery, was to have another one that was even better and at home. I was believing for a home birth, and I had it all prepared in terms of my bedroom, and my husband and I were sticking together in unity, and we were praying and declaring the scriptures, and this is what we were going for. Now, it started off at home. I had 3 midwives attend because they always attend in pairs, plus I had another one who had moved to the area and was getting some experience of the region and how the midwifery service works. So it all was going extremely well. I spent most of the time at home downstairs in the living room reading scripture, praising God, time firstly on my own because the contractions started during the night, and then when my husband got up he joined me and we played some games, and the midwife came and she kind of left us to it. She was very discreet. She went upstairs with her paperwork, and every so often she'd come down to listen to the baby's heart and feel the contractions and occasionally check my blood pressure, that kind of thing. The first examination that she did, I was already 8 centimetres and I'd experienced no contraction pain, which was wonderful. I was in peace, and all was well. Now, it was getting close to lunchtime, and so we had a little bit of lunch, my husband and I, and then my husband said, I think we want this baby to be born soon, don't we? I'm not quite sure why he said it. Should we just move on upstairs, which is where I'd planned to actually deliver, in the bedroom? And I was like, yeah, let's go upstairs. I was thinking also that that would be sensible because obviously closer to delivery you don't really want to be climbing stairs. So up we went. Now, as I came into the bedroom, the 3 midwives were all seated. We have quite a large bedroom, so they'd managed to seat themselves on dining room chairs up there at the foot of the bed, and there was still enough room for us to all move around, so it wasn't too cramped, but certainly the atmosphere was a little different. Obviously my husband and I had been alone in the living room. We had been praising and praying through the contractions, and yeah, we were in God's presence. But the midwives, not being believers, and not being known to us even, the way that they do it in Cornwall is that you have the on-call midwife come to you if you're wanting to have a home birth, and that wouldn't necessarily be the midwife that you had seen throughout the pregnancy. It might be if she happens to be on call, but otherwise it'll just be one of her colleagues who's on call. So I'd never met any of these ladies, although they were very lovely. Anyway, I started to experience some pain and felt really that I wasn't able to stay in the presence of the Lord and focus in on him and what he was saying with these other people there. That wasn't their fault. It's just the way it was. So I found myself doing things a little bit differently. And I think that that was a mistake, and that's one of the things that I'd like to share with you in a minute. Anyway, all was going extremely well, but then I started to bleed. It was not painful, it was just bleeding. And one of the midwives said, I think, to her colleague there, I think we're going to need to get her into hospital just in case. And they really sort of took charge. They kind of took the decision out of my hands and out of my husband's hands and started to express some fear about this bleeding. And I don't remember being particularly fearful, but obviously we were coming under their care and their expertise, their guidance and protocol and wisdom from their point of view had it that we should go into hospital. Now, as soon as that decision was made, it felt like things then unravelled. Kieran and I were separated. I went in an ambulance. He drove on behind the ambulance to the local maternity unit for me to be monitored and to deliver there. Now, once I got into the ambulance, I must have been getting closer to birth as well, I started to get bad pain. I was alone with one of the midwives, and I was also using gas and air at this point to reduce pain. Now, the pain was pretty constant, but it also got worse with the contractions. And on reflection, I think that this was the pain of an abruption, a placental abruption, and accentuated then by the contractions. And I, along with the gas and air, I kind of lost control, really. I certainly wasn't in that secure place with the Lord. And once I got to the hospital and up into the delivery room, I was then surrounded by medical professionals and the midwives. I had a paediatrician there, an anaesthetist, an obstetrician, 2, maybe 3 midwives, possibly a medical student, I can't quite remember, and my husband, myself, and a healthcare assistant. And basically they'd all rallied round, which, I mean, if you think about it, it is wonderful to have all this help on tap, but not a single person in the room would have been having faith for this situation, faith in God. And I continued to bleed. As the birth approached, it got incredibly painful, and I was still using gas and air, and Kieran was there, but I don't remember him. I'm sure he was praying, but I don't remember him praying. And I myself was, I think, just calling out to God, but there was definitely fear and pain and very different from when we were at home together, myself and my husband, with the Lord, and there was no bleeding, so there was nothing that anyone was kind of concerned about. So I would say from the beginning of the labour up to when I was 8 centimetres dilated, it was very similar to my second delivery. Supernatural, pain-free, awesome. And then once the bleeding started, everything sort of changed. And anyway, I did deliver my son and my second son, and he was absolutely fine. I continued to bleed after he was delivered and while the placenta was being delivered, and I lost a lot of blood, and I was very anemic, and I had to stay in hospital for 2 nights, and I had an iron transfusion. I wasn't producing enough milk because of the loss of blood, and baby was fractious, hungry, and also quite mucousy, and it wasn't the best start. And I came home and I questioned God. I was like, that was not what I was expecting. What was going on? How did that happen? Anyway, I've come to terms with it all now, and there's lots really I could say, but I just want to boil it down to 3 or maybe 4 points. Perhaps the first point is that we took some decisions for ourselves. The first decision we took for ourselves was that we wanted this baby born soon. So we were going to go upstairs in preparation for that, which is kind of foolishness, really. I mean, you don't have a lot of control over when your baby's born. What we should have done, I think, is we should have stayed in the living room and we should have asked God, like we did with my first son's birth. We said, God, when should we go to the hospital, the birthing centre? And he had said, if you go now, you'll have your baby. And that's exactly what happened, and it was fine. This time we popped ourselves upstairs and we went up there too soon, basically, I think. I think God would have kept us in the living room, and if there'd been some bleeding, we would have had time alone to bring this situation to the Lord alone, without the decisions and things sort of taking over. Then the second thing is that I can take from this that might help is that you can become a little bit focused on having this supernatural pain-free childbirth, and that's your goal, and you've got your scriptures and off you go. And you kind of forget that you've got a relationship with God. I mean, you don't, but it's your relationship with him and what he says and how he guides and what he's doing that is important. Sure, we have to have faith for things, but let that faith come from a relationship with him. And I think I became a bit too goal focused to have this home birth and to have a second pain-free delivery. He would have given me a complete pain-free delivery, but I think I lost sight of him along the journey. So yeah, I'd just say keep your relationship with God as the priority. And then the next thing I learned was that when you come under the other people's authority, so I was under the midwife's authority, I was under the healthcare system's authority, things don't always pan out as God intended, or what might otherwise have been. I think they sort of took control, and certainly once I got into the ambulance, that was when the pain started, I was separated from Kieran, my husband, as I said, and it was all very medicalised then, very clinical, very medicalised protocols, and and that's how it is. I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying that it could have been different. Again, if we'd not made that first decision to go upstairs, we could have had time alone, perhaps seen that there was bleeding for ourselves and taken some time to speak over the bleeding. And we may not have got into the same kind of situation. However, we may have done. You never know. You never really know. But this is what I've taken from it. So, is there a way around that? Certainly in the UK, you do have some level of being able to do this by yourself, but there's also quite a lot of pressure, and certainly some pressure on me, having already had a big bleed during delivery, to go into hospital from the outset for any future deliveries, and I am actually expecting again. So watch this space. And then the final thing to say is that despite the difficulties, and there were some difficulties towards the end of the pregnancy as well, not within me, but the fact that I'd gone overdue, I was required, really for their peace of mind rather than mine, to go into hospital every other day for a scan and monitoring. And that was difficult. It was during coronavirus. I wasn't allowed to take Kieran. It took a long time, each appointment, and some travelling. But anyway, through those experiences, through the birth experience in hospital, and through the 2 days that I then spent overnight in the postnatal ward, God was able to just use those situations, despite them not being what I wanted, to, I think, impact others, give me a chance to speak about him, to come alongside some other mums that had delivered, were on the ward, to speak into the lives of some of the midwives and at least one of the doctors before the delivery, and these opportunities just to share Christ and the testimony of what he does and who he is was just phenomenal. And so I said to God, if it was all for that, if I had to go through all of that in order to have those experiences, to be able to serve you and to share you with others, then it was worth it. One little point that I want to make, which goes, I think, for all suffering, is that God does not sin, and he doesn't use evil to test us. I might be wrong, but my understanding is that when we go through trials, when we're tested, when our sin or the sins of others are putting us through some stuff, God can use it, but he's not the orchestrator of sin and of evil. And I think with this birth, my last birth, that the enemy was definitely at work. The systems of the world definitely were affecting what was happening, and it wasn't really God's will that I should almost bleed to death. It wasn't God's will that I should have to be rushed into hospital in an ambulance. It wasn't God's will that I should be anemic and unable to feed my baby properly. It wasn't God's will that I should have really bad pain at the end of the labour, and that Kieran and I should be separated, or that I should be unable to remain focused. The gas and air also meant that I wasn't really able to remain focused on the Lord. It wasn't his will, any of this, but he still managed to use it. Anyway, I'm now pregnant again, and it's been a very busy time. We've moved house twice in this last year, and there's been lots going on. I have to confess that I haven't had a great deal of time to prepare for the birth and the baby coming. Thankfully, I have got a little bit of time now, and I'm hoping now we're a bit more settled that I can be asking the Lord about this baby, about the birth to come, and looking at those scriptures again and remembering the two key scriptures for you in case you haven't watched my first video, is that in Genesis it says that Eve was cursed. She would have increased pain and difficulty in child rearing and in childbirth. But in Galatians it says Christ took the curse for our wrongdoing. When he hung on the tree, he took that curse. And so Eve was cursed, womankind was cursed. Pain in childbirth being one of those curses. But when we're in Christ, he's taken that pain for us. We can have a pain-free supernatural childbirth. And actually that goes also for the pregnancy, that we can have a pregnancy like it would have been before the fall in the Garden of Eden. And we can also enjoy motherhood like it would have been before the fall. I don't think it's possible to not go through trials, but I do think that we can live much more victorious lives than we are, much more supernatural lives than we are, and it's all down to Christ and what he's done for us and our relationship with him. So I've spoken for far too long, but I hope this has been helpful. God bless.